From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host David Perry, and we have a great show lined up for you today. As we all know, the 60 days regular session of the West Virginia Legislature recently concluded, but some unfinished business remains before the legislature, and certainly a tremendous focus throughout the 60-day regular session was education in the state of West Virginia's, and ways in which we could perhaps improve the quality of education for our students here in the Mountain State. And we're happy to be joined, David, today by a gentleman we know quite well, the President of the West Virginia AFT, American Federation of Teachers, Mr. Fred Albert. And Fred, welcome to the Capitol Report show, my friend.
Thank
you.
Thank you very
much. Again, looking back on the 60-day regular session, if we could maybe just start our discussion by, offering some observations of what some of the upsides and downsides, exactly what we saw during the recently concluded session.
Absolutely. Well, we had the omnibus education bill that became the hot topic very soon after the session started. Senate Bill 451, it was finally given a number. And we watched that very closely as it progressed very quickly out of the Senate Education Committee and then to the House floor. And while there were some good parts to that bill, there was too much in that bill. Our Governor Justice, back in October, had promised a pay raise to all teachers and service personnel and public employees. And we felt that that was his promise. And Senator Mitch Carmichael, the President of the Senate, told us several times that he supported that and that would happen. But we were disappointed to find that that was in this omnibus education bill. We felt from the very beginning, I think the bill originally was like 148 pages long, and there was just too much there to consume all at once. That while there were good things in that bill and things that would certainly help move education forward in our state, we need to look at those things separately and let them stand alone. That's been our stand all along. Let's take each thing and really research it, discuss it, bring in all the stakeholders, and look at each part of that bill independently and let it stand on its own. So we came from there to now.
Mr. President, what seems to be lost in some of this discussion, early on there was much discussion about PEIA.
Yes.
And towards the end of the session, you heard very little. And I think at the end of the session, nothing was done with PEIA, was it?
Well, it was, I think, in the budget that it was a line item to, shore up or to help PEIA, but it's not fixed. And you are so right. That was what brought teachers and service personnel out of the classrooms, out of the school buildings last year. Was the PEIA piece, and you're right, it was not fixed this session. That was a hope that we all had, that there would be a long-term fix, and it has not happened.
And that fix would have been a dedicated, committed funding stream, as I understand.
Exactly, and that has not happened.
And again, going back to the issue of the comprehensive nature of legislation. Again, incremental progress, the ability to define areas where there may be need, opportunities for improvement. And it appeared to me that perhaps in advance of the session, the process of conferring with stakeholders, getting buy-in from those stakeholders who can become a part of the process as opposed to being on the outside looking in. Is that a fair characterization of maybe how some stakeholders felt?
Oh, I think it's exactly right on point. I travel all across the state meeting with teachers and service personnel, with parents, with students, and everywhere I travel, I hear the same thing. We know that there can be things to make education better. And I think the teachers and service personnel and parents are the experts on what our students need. And we're the ones that need to be sitting at the table discussing what is needed to help education in West Virginia in our public schools. So we felt pretty much shut out. We had made offers, and yes, there was a public hearing during one of the House sessions, but the public was only allowed to speak for 70 seconds in the morning and 85 seconds in the evening. You can't really have much discussion limited to 70 seconds or 85 seconds. But we had some outside groups who came in and testified before the committees, and they were allowed hours to plead their case or to give input. We felt like it was really not the correct way to go, that we do need the stakeholders at the table talking about how we move education forward in West Virginia.
So we put the session behind us.
Yes.
And now it would appear that the forms have been provided that will allow for that input by the citizenry, by the organizations represent teachers and service personnel, supported by the governor.
Yes.
And of course, you've attended one of those at this point. What do you think about this process at this point, Fred?
I think it's the right way to go. You know, we were disappointed that things weren't taken care of during the regular session. We felt that they could have been and should have been. But however, since they weren't, we feel this is the right pathway. And I was fortunate enough to go to Cabell Midland High School last night to attend the first forum. I liked the format. I liked the fact that we were able to, it was very comfortable. You felt you had the freedom to speak and talk and express your beliefs and your concerns. And it was a very well attended. I think there were over 261 people there last night. A nice cross section of parents. There were students there, teachers, service personnel, retirees, legislators. We had senators and House of Representatives there, delegates there. I thought it was a great format, and I look forward to the continuing forum. It's a good way to sit down and talk about the issues that are very important to all of us and how we do transformation in education. I think this is the right way to go.
And again, for the benefit of our viewers, Fred, the current status upon the conclusion of the 60-day regular legislative session, it's my understanding the legislature adjourned sine die, then reconvened and went into recess at that point. But there has been a call for a special session issued by the governor that defines the parameters of what the legislature may take up in special session, which in this matter I suppose is fairly broad in terms of educational improvement opportunities, and but the public forums, again, that's an opportunity not only for stakeholders, but I assume community members,
yes,
parents, those that have children enrolled to public schools to come out and express their opinions and views on educational issues. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. And as I said last night, there was a good cross-section of community members there. I was in one group, and you get a chance to, there are 4 different topic groups being discussed. You get to attend 3 half-hour sessions of your choice. In one of the groups that I attended, there was a young student there from Cabell Midland High School. He had great input into the topic we were discussing. And I want to encourage people to actually take advantage of these forums. I know there are people who say, well, you know, there's no need to, they've already made their mind up. No, we really need to give this an opportunity. We've asked for input, we've asked for the stakeholders to have a seat at the table. Now we have it. Let's go and do it and make your voice heard. It's extremely important.
Of course, as well as these forums, the State Department of Education has put out a survey
Yes.
to all teachers, principals, assistant principals, students, and parents.
Yes.
And I understand at this point they're seeing some 4,000 return.
Great.
Which I think the input is great. Let's talk just very quickly about 2 things that you took back from the session last night that has been proposed in terms of transformation of education in the state of West Virginia.
Yes. Well, I think that we all agree that education is not broken here in West Virginia. Our teachers, our service personnel do great jobs in providing services every day for our students in West Virginia. You know, recently we were told that West Virginia ranks third in the nation as far as our graduation rates. That's something to celebrate. We have a lot of great things going on. Can we do better? Absolutely, we know that we can. But we need to look at the student as a whole person and try to meet their needs. And we have students in our schools who are hurting because of circumstances beyond their control, whether it's the opioid crisis that has plagued our state, whether it's broken homes, it's foster homes, whatever the case may be. We have students who need help that goes beyond the scope of what our teachers, our classroom teachers, are able to provide right now. That's one of the things I heard last night. We do need more support services in our school. That's imperative if we plan to move education forward in our state. We've got to meet those needs of our
And that
students.
was one of the proposals within the package that was sent to the Senate, Step 6 allowance, I think.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Fred, again, our time's running a little bit short, but it seems to me in this instance there may be a couple of issues that tend to be a little more toxic than others, that a lot of times we can agree on 95% of things, but we spend 95% of our time arguing about the 10th of the 5% we can't agree on. And again, it seemed to me that during the regular session, obviously charter schools and education savings accounts were two issues that tended to kind of gin up a little bit of anxiety and concern. Is that fair? As we go out into the forums, those still seem to be the more controversial elements of
Well, I don't know that probably so, but I think that it gives, again, the citizenry of our state to have a time to discuss this, to fully put it on the table and give the pros and the cons. From what I heard last night, school choice, we have school choice. Parents have a choice to put their children in private school or to homeschool them or however they want to educate them. That choice is there. Should the taxpayers bear that burden? That's a discussion that needs to be had. But I think there are other issues more important that we really need to focus on, and those issues are more support services for our public schools, for our public school students, meeting the need of the whole child. I like what one of our state board members, Deborah Sullivan, said in an op-ed that she wrote in the Charleston Gazette. Our children are more than just a test score. They're a whole human being. And we've got to meet the needs of that whole human child in order to get them a quality education. And I think there are other issues besides charter schools and educational savings accounts that we need to focus on. And I'm hoping that's where the focus will be.
Fred, I know at one point we talked about innovation zones.
Yes.
And we had funded innovation zones. In 2015, that funding disappeared. There seems to be a large support, or a lot of support out there for the recreation or the reinstitution of innovation zones.
Absolutely, because we hear, what is the advantage of a charter school? Well, what we hear is some advantages would be to untether the hands of teachers and let them teach doing what they know best to do. And that is allowed in the innovation zones. That's how they were created. The community schools, community and schools, that's part of the innovation zone. There's so much that can be done under the premise of innovation zones. Let's explore that and let's fund them. Some great things have come out of the innovation zones, so why would we not want to go back and revisit that and fund them so we can do some exciting things for our students? Okay. That's important.
Well, again, unfortunately, our time has expired, but again, we would encourage the citizens in West Virginia to come on out and be a part of the education forums that are currently being conducted in 8 communities throughout the state of West Virginia, because nothing more important than the educational future of our children. But Fred Albert, President of the West Virginia AFT, thanks for joining us today on the Capitol Report.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break and be right back to the Capitol Report, so stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber & Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt & Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report as we continue today's program, and our second guest today, a good friend of ours, the President of the West Virginia AFL-CIO, Josh Sword. And Josh, welcome back to the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
You bet. Well, the West Virginia Legislature has concluded its 60-day regular session, and I know that you all monitor very closely the public policy issues and debates before the legislature. I didn't see an awful lot of things affecting the interests of working families in West Virginia, but you know, in retrospect, you know, give us your summary of what you thought they managed to accomplish this year.
Well, you're right, Bill. You didn't see a lot related to issues affecting working families because that's not the priorities of the legislative leadership. It's not to help working families. It's to help others. And you know, others is a pretty broad description, but working families continue to get left behind under this leadership in the current legislature. So, you know, we were playing a lot of defense, just making sure that, you know, this war of working families is not continuing to the degree that it was. And of course, a lot of the energy was taken up related to the omnibus education bill, and that really slowed things down. You know, 60 days looks like a long time on paper, but as you both know, when you get up there in that capacity and you're dealing with all those issues, it really flies by. And we're up there every day and every night looking out for the interests of working families. So we played some defense. They passed a bill related to elections that we're very disappointed in, and we've now asked Governor Justice to veto it. It does a lot of different things, but the things that really pop out of the bill that it does that will have a direct impact on working families in West Virginia, it increases the individual contribution maximums from individuals to candidates. Right now it's $1,000 per election cycle. Under this bill would jump up to $2,800. The same goes for contributions from political action committees to candidates. Right now it's $1,000. Under this bill, it would jack up to $5,000 maximum per election cycle. And what we'll see if the governor doesn't veto this bill is even more money from outside West Virginia. These big, giant corporations from outside West Virginia dumping even more money in here, controlling or having an influence in our elections. And it's unfortunate because a lot of really good candidates running on behalf of working families in their districts have lost because of all this outside dark money, and this bill does nothing to help it. In fact, it'll only exacerbate the problem because of the increase in the contribution limits.
And again, you know, the transparency of those donor bases sometimes pretty hard to figure that out too. But again, you know, some success I noticed recently in the Circuit Court of Kanawha County, a major ruling affecting a major change in the law that impacted and affected working families, and that was the right to work legislation passed by the West Virginia Legislature, I believe, in 2016. Tell us a little bit about that court ruling and what implications that has.
Well, you're right. It was a great victory for us. You know, in 2016, the legislature passed right to work, and we immediately challenged that piece of legislation in court. And it's been almost 3 years now, but a lot of things have happened that sort of led to the delay. Long story short, Judge Bailey issued a ruling recently in our favor, ruling that that bill violates our constitutional rights as union members and as leaders of unions. And she cited three different areas of our state's constitution in which that bill is in conflict. First and foremost, the right of association. Second, and the illegal taking clause in our state's constitution. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, certain liberties that we have and are protected under our state's constitution. So essentially, an individual or any organization cannot be required to do something for nothing, which is essentially what Right to Work does. So we're very pleased with the ruling. Look, this is likely going to get appealed on up to the state Supreme Court, and some suggest that it could ultimately end up in front of the United States Supreme Court. So we'll just have to see what happens along the way. But we're very pleased. You know, we've thought all along that this bill is wrong, and for a lot of different reasons, but it clearly violates our Constitution. It lowers wages, it takes away our benefits, it makes our workplaces less safe. Nothing good comes out of this bill except these out-of-state corporate interests. They want to control what happens here in West Virginia, and it's unfortunate that the legislative leadership has bought into that, and we're going to continue fighting, we're going to continue advocating for working families, and the Right to Work lawsuit is just one more example of us doing that.
You talked about this sets up the appellate process. Of course, it's my understanding since that ruling, the Attorney General has asked for a stay or
Yeah, included in the ruling was a 30-day stay, which essentially means that Right to Work is the law of the land for at least the next 30 days. The Supreme Court has now in front of them a request from the Attorney General, who's representing the state, to extend that because this is going to likely take months, this appeal. So, you know, we'll see what the Supreme Court decides to do, but in the short term, we're going to celebrate this victory. Judge Bailey, she was right on point with her ruling, and it's a 46-page ruling that on every page refers to previous court decisions to back up why this thing is unconstitutional. And one other thing I'll say, because I hear the other side say, well, we have Right to Work in 25 other states and this, that, and the other. That might be true. But our challenge was to West Virginia's Constitution, not any other state's Constitution. And our Constitution is different than the 49 other states. So we feel really good about the ruling, and you know, hopefully we'll be successful regardless of whatever appeal may be in front of us. But we know overturning that law is good for working families in West Virginia, and we're going to keep fighting it.
Josh, it might be helpful and interesting to our viewers. You know, the AFL-CIO, you all, you know, are a, you know, an organized labor entity representing, again, the interests of working families. But you have affiliate members of the AFL-CIO, and I understand recently Teamster Local 175 perhaps voted to affiliate. If you could maybe just generally provide some description as to the AFL-CIO and how that affiliation process works.
Sure. Well, the AFL-CIO is really the umbrella organization for almost all the unions in West Virginia. We have 57 international unions that are affiliated. A handful aren't, and we're always trying to work on that. So, you know, one of the things that we were able to do starting, you know, back in, or at least in my tenure in 2014, was cultivating a relationship with organizations that weren't affiliated but are a good fit for the AFL-CIO. One of those was, or actually the first one on the list was Teamsters Local 175 with local president Ken Hall. As he's not only president of the local here, but he's actually secretary-treasurer of the International Teamsters Union. And a great leader. We cultivated a great relationship with him over the years. In fact, in 2016, when the Right to Work legislation passed, Ken was identified by us, all of us in labor, as the point person, the spokesperson on behalf of all of us. He did a fantastic job. He's very articulate. His message is always strong and powerful. He's a great leader. We welcome the Teamsters to be a part of, you know, the House of Labor here in West Virginia. You know, they have such a rich and storied tradition, and as do all of our affiliates, quite frankly. But it's great to have them. to be a part of the AFL-CIO, because a united labor movement is a stronger labor movement, and Lord knows we need a stronger labor movement moving forward, because fewer and fewer people are advocating on behalf of working families, especially with the legislative leadership in Charleston.
Josh, labor has always taken an extreme interest in education and been involved in education. AFL-CIO has been United Mine Workers of America and so forth, and they were involved in the recent work stoppages or strikes. But out of that came the proposition of local hearings and local meetings. What position have you all taken relevant to those hearings or open forums?
We're advocating participation at the public forums, because, you know, not only do we represent educators, they're obviously affiliated with the AFL-CIO, but many of our union members are parents of children in public schools, and, you know, it's an opportunity. Public education is really the great equalizer, and without a strong public education system, we're going to continue to struggle. It's going to be even worse, quite frankly. And this idea of pulling money out of our public system and giving to, you know, private schools or homeschoolers or out-of-state corporations coming in here to run charter schools flies in the face of everything we stand for. We're absolutely supporting our educators on this. We're encouraging people to get out to these public forums and let whoever is listening, because I don't think a lot of our legislative leaders are listening, let's be honest. I mean, some have already declared what they want to see during the special session. But for those that are listening, these are the real concerns of our educators, of our parents, and let's ask our students too. I mean, you know, they have a vested interest in this as well. So we're supportive of our educators, and we're proud to be supportive within the community. We support bonds, we support levies, because we know these additional resources are needed to give the kids the best education possible, and that's what we should be doing here in West Virginia.
The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber and Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt and Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report as we close out today's show. And Dave, great guest today, certainly Fred Albert with West Virginia AFT, really responsive to his membership and trying to represent the interests of teachers as stakeholders in our public education system. But my goodness, these education forums to be held throughout the state, very important part of the process leading up to the special session.
Absolutely, Bill, and of course it's been increased from 7 to 8, as you said, which will be one in Parkersburg next Monday at 6 p.m.
On behalf of co-host Dave Perry, I'm Bill Laird, again thanking you for tuning us in on the Capitol Report. Have a good week and goodbye, everybody.
This has been the West Virginia Capitol Report.